So we're talking about elections, we're talking about money, and we're also talking about FTX. And in fact, let me just share this with you guys. Sam Bankman-Fried, so he's the founder, CEO dude over at FTX. If you don't know, this is a cryptocurrency exchange that may or may not be melting down the day. We made a couple of videos about it today. But he donates money to both political parties, and I think he's like one of the top 10 donors in the U.S., so he gives a lot of money. And in fact, when I say in the U.S., his company is based out of the Bahamas. They're down there for tax shelter reasons and for legal shelter reasons. I don't like this guy, and he's been buying up politicians and YouTubers for quite a long time, and that's why I've been making videos about this to warn you guys about these kind of things. And he actually tweeted out, he said, "Hey everybody," you can see right here, "I was a significant donor in both the Democratic and Republican primaries, supporting constructive candidates across the aisle to prevent pandemics and bring bipartisan climate to DC, and working with them to support permissionless finance." So essentially, he's trying to buy up politicians to get his benefits for his crypto business, of course. I mean, it's not like these people work out of the kindness of their heart. I personally think that one person shouldn't have too much influence in politics. I like to believe, one person, one vote kind of thing. I don't think it's crazy. And this has been a real issue is often not talked about enough. I talk about you guys with many times on this channel that I would love to run someday, but it just takes so much money to run. And it's just the way that our system is in USA. And one of the things that, if you look at the headline here, Biden pushes election, quote, dark money disclosure bill doomed to fail in Congress. And so basically what this is like, should we know where money's coming from when it's donated to, say, commercials on TV? Should we know where money's coming from when it's donated to, advertising, say, on Facebook, these kind of things? Should there be transparency in these things? I'd like to hear your opinion on it. My opinion is yes. Especially in political campaigns, it should be fully transparent where money is coming from, who's giving who money, these kind of things. And this is something that is actually the Democrats are always trying to pass. It usually doesn't pass because the Republicans block it. I'm not just making random stuff up. I encourage you to look at this up because I always know when I bring up any kind of like stuff, like, "Oh, Chris, you're just making stuff up. I love Republicans. They would never do that." Read the stuff for yourself, guys, but I'm going to read it with you. I'm not making stuff up. And so the question is, do you believe that we should have full transparency in campaign financing? I say yes, and the argument for no would be free speech. That's what they'll say. They'll say, well, you should be able to say whatever you want, whenever you want, and give as much money as you want, right? And this has always been an interesting debate. Now let's read some of this stuff. This week, Republicans are going to take a stand on whether they want to fight the power of dark money or allow this cancer to grow even worse. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, a Democrat from Rhode Island, who is a major proponent of the legislation, told CNN on Wednesday that, quote, "totally important to get members on the record, even though the bill had very little chance of advancing." And then you can see here, the Disclosure Act first passed the House of Representatives narrowly in 2010 and failed twice in the Senate in 2012, and it's going to fail, or already failed again in the Senate this year. So the basic gist is like, why do you bring a bill and vote on it, even though probably don't have the votes to pass? Is because you want to get people on record of saying, I don't want campaign transparency. I don't want finance transparency, that kind of stuff. And so the Republicans usually vote this stuff down. We'll read some more details on this. The legislation would require greater transparency into who is behind much of the secretive, often negative campaign advertising. It would require, and this is again, require most independent groups to pay for political advertising, which is currently not required to disclose the names of donors, to release the names of those give donations of $10,000 or more. This is President Joe Biden. Ultimately, this comes down to public trust. Biden said in the White House, dark money erodes public trust. We need to protect public trust, and I'm determined to do that. Similarly, Senator Majority Chuck Schumer had insisted earlier this week that would bring bills to the Senate floor to put GOP members on the record as lawmakers turn towards midterm elections. Now, I understand, in the midterms, people are going to be talking about probably abortion is going to be the big one, or we're talking about the war in Ukraine. I personally think how we elect officials and where the money comes from should be one of the most important issues. It's been something that usually third-party candidates bring up, like Ralph Nader will bring up all the time. Andrew Yang is another, say, third-party candidate. He'll be like, hey, we should maybe get rid of our primary system the way that we do it and just have an open primary and anyone votes for anyone that they like, right? The way the sort of system is now, it's controlled by two parties. But when you try to bring any kind of transparency stuff like this, usually Republicans vote it down. And you're probably wondering why would they do that? Like I said, it's a free speech thing, the way that they make the argument. And you can agree or not with that. I'd love to hear people agree with that. I'm fine for debates on this kind of stuff. This kind of stuff, I'm totally fine for debate and love to hear arguments for or against. I am for it, but I think it's, a reason why you would say it was like, just for example, the reason why you would be maybe against any kind of campaign finance reform and say, well, I'm a rich person. I have lots of money. I can spend my money any way that I want, any private way that I want, and it's my money, this kind of thing. And I get that point of view. I disagree because I think we're talking about elections, and I don't like the idea of rich having too much power. But I fully understand if someone has money, why am I limiting their free speech rights? This is sort of the questions I'm posing to you guys. And you could also make the case too as well, because and this would be against the Democrats. Just for example, oftentimes Democrat money will come in from out of state to certain states. Let's say like in a Georgia election, you could say, well, why can someone from California donate money to a Georgia election? I think that's a reasonable issue as well. This would also be an issue of, say, campaign finance reform and these kind of things. So I hope you guys understand. I'm totally open to talking about this stuff. I want fair and free elections. I don't think it's crazy, and I want transparency. That's my opinion. But let's just read through some of this stuff here. On Thursday, Senate Republicans moved to block advancement on the Disclose Act, a bill intended to reform campaign finance transparency and require non-party organizations to disclose who is contributing to campaign bills and seeking influence. And then here's the vote here. So the vote failed along party lines, 49-49, with Democrats in favor and 2 senators not not voting. So basically, a couple people were sick. And excuse me, guys. Campaign spending has ballooned in 12 years since the Supreme Court decision in Citizens United versus FEC. $2.1 billion alone was spent by super PACs. And then there's a quote here by McConnell. Here he says here, before the vote, Senator Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, this Republican from Kentucky, called the Disclose Act, quote, a liberal pet priority designed to give unelected federal bureaucrats vastly more power over private citizens' First Amendment rights and political activism. So again, the argument against transparency is that you're limiting someone's free speech and you're limiting their freedom, essentially, free speech and freedom. So that's essentially the argument against. I disagree with Mr. McConnell, but I understand the argument. So again, just bring this up to you guys because we don't really talk about this stuff that much because, again, it has no chance of passing because Republicans usually vote it down. The other thing is, too, when we're talking about elections, there was already been some problems here with absentee ballots. This is in the Atlanta area. I guess 1,000 people, I think the number was 1,046, so about 1,000 though. They requested absentee ballots, but they didn't receive them, which is a whole fiasco. And they, usually these kind of things you request it like a month in advance or something. You're just, waiting for it to come in the mail, and then suddenly election day is here. It's like, crap, where's my ballot? And I think this stuff's messed up. I want you guys to understand. I want everyone to have the if they want to vote, to go ahead and vote and get your ballot if you requested one. It is a shame to hear these kind of things, and you'll hear these stories every year. I've lived long enough. I'm pushing 50. I've lived long enough to hear this stuff all the time, and it generally just, I'm telling you how it is. It generally happens in minority, like Latino, Black areas where you just always wonder what's going on with this stuff. Here's a quote from, this is on their website, Cobb County. And they're saying, see here, Election and Registration Director Janine Eveler attributed the situation to human error, with staff not following procedures on 2 days to ensure ballots were mailed. I am sorry, this office let these voters down. Many of the absentee staff have been averaging 80 hours or more per week. They are exhausted. Still no excuse for such critical error. The other thing is too is you'll often hear, and this is just keep me real, guys, is Democrats will try to increase funding for elections to essentially have more money for work and stuff like that. Usually Republicans vote these kind of things down. It is a real thing. Like I said, I'm not making stuff up. And every election too, you always see this kind of stuff in the Black and Latino voting districts. They have really long lines because there's not enough poll workers, or they close the polls early, which happens. So I've lived this. I've seen this every single year, and it's a real shame. It's a real shame. And you go to the white neighborhoods, and the polls are all just fine. So if you think I'm making stuff up, please let me know. But I'm not. And I believe that people have a right to vote. You can vote for whoever you like. I think it's fine. But I also want equal sort of protections of voting, be it I personally think we should have a national holiday. This is something that Democrats would always vote for, Republicans would always vote these kind of things down. Essentially, I encourage people to vote. I want high participation. That generally benefits Democrats. Is just sort of how this game is played, and it's been that through long history where either voter intimidation or try to discourage Black and Latino voters from voting. It's a real thing, but I understand by saying this kind of stuff, people get upset. People think I'm making things up, and you can live whatever world you like. But I'm just showing you guys stuff. I've seen it for years. And this is something I'm just pointing out because I want you to watch for it tomorrow. When they show polling places, do the Black and Latino neighborhoods have really long lines? Yes, it's great to see democracy in action, that everyone's going out to the polls, but you don't want to see lines too long. You want to, be able to vote, get in, get out. Some people have to go to work, right? For example, and they don't want to wait so long, just for example, or some people can't make it to the polls because maybe their job doesn't, allow them for the particular hours. You never know what someone's work thing is, if they have, like a Walmart kind of job or a, like a labor job that just doesn't honor their vote, or just whatever reason, any number of reasons. I'm just saying this is a real thing. The other thing is too is I am concerned about campaign violence. We'll see if that happens. I mean, when you read these articles, and I've taught this before, guns at voting sites have long sparked votes, fears of intimidation and violence in a few states. So it's like only in the USA where we have to worry about this kind of stuff, like people bringing guns to the polls and like kind of threatening people and stuff like that. And you have this issue too. Actually, I'll go that last one in a second, but this one here, like, this is the Texas newspaper. And look at the headline. In Texas, is it legal to carry a gun into the polling place? It's like, why are we even having this conversation? It's so crazy. And then we have this other one too, is this has been, and I was actually going to make a separate video on this. I just never did. But I'm just telling you about it now. There was this thing that was going on in Florida. It was by DeSantis, and DeSantis, he's going to run for president, and so he's been doing these basic stunts. Some of the stunts, and I think it was Florida, and I believe the governor of Texas. The first stunt was they were flying essentially illegal immigrants, or you want to call these people legal aliens. You can use that word as well, whatever you want to say. Documented workers, any number of these things, but you get my point. But they were, essentially putting these people in planes and flying to DC, and they would put them like on, Vice President Kamala Harris's, front lawn in DC, that kind of stuff. So they were paying a lot of money to these political stunts. This thing was I felt really bad for these people. It didn't make front page news, and that's why I like to make videos about this kind of stuff. But the basic idea was that there were black voters in Florida who had served time in prison, right? And then they went to go register to vote. The voting place would give them the registration, and then they would go ahead and vote. And then it turns out that they weren't supposed to vote because I guess the way it works is like they're just not eligible. And so then the police would come to their house and arrest said people. And if you can find these videos on the internet, I'm not making stuff up. It was sad because like the police come to his house and this person's like, what did I do wrong? What's going on? And they're like, did you vote? And they're like, yeah, I voted. And again, this stems from the election place should not even given them, I guess, the stuff to begin with. So it's sort of just the whole thing is a mess. And now the situation is now, if anyone has any kind of criminal record in Florida, they're kind of nervous about voting at all because they don't want to break the law, right? So I hope you guys understand what's going on here. They never should have, I guess, given the voting card in the first place, but then since the election people gave it to them and they have this thing, they're just like, oh, okay, I'll go vote. And I think there's a lot of problems in our system, and I'm just pointing out some of you guys, but oftentimes, this is very real, oftentimes it does target Black and Latino communities, so I do care about these things. And once you bring in race, so usually people turn their mind off and they're just like, oh, Chris, you're just such a liar. You're just such a liar, Chris. And that's all you can do. You can just tell people the truth about what's going on in the world, and they can choose to believe it or not. And you can choose to decide if you think it's a good thing or a bad thing that someone like FTX dude who lives in Bahamas can donate as much money as he wants to politicians. You can decide if you think that's good, and also you can decide if you think that we should have full transparency in these kind of things when it comes to elections. So you guys know my point of view on this stuff, and I'm bringing it up because I think it's important.